Well, hello and good morning. This is Ashley with Intermark Group. Thanks so much for joining today's webinar. This is our sixth webinar of the day. Wow. On psychology marketing. Today's webinar topic is a little different and will be a lot of fun. Over the next 60 minutes, we're going to talk about conflict and tension. This is not the kind where you want to pull out your hair, but more as it relates to storytelling and how brands can incorporate into the experience of advertising to optimize success. So today we're going to dissect conflict and tension strategies that your brand can use to engage customers when tension is high, like now, as well as deploy any time to engage customers as well as gain market and of course mind share against your competition. So we're going to help you poke the bear. We're going to help you embrace imperfection. We're going to help you carve a niche. And of course, use conflict responsibly to push the envelope with marketing. Our webinar speakers today for the newbies on the call from Intermark are Jake McKenzie and Dr. David Bridwell. Jake McKenzie is the CEO of Intermark and considered a national expert on psychology-driven marketing. He has a background in psychology and has helped shape successful brands like Toyota, Krispy Kreme, Progressive Insurance, and more. He loves the outdoors. He's an avid reader and also a father to four. Dr. David Bridwell is a people scientist at Intermark by day and a musician by night. Super interested in understanding how people are influenced and how they make decisions. At Intermark, he helps ensure our creative is informed by behavior science and uses applied psychology to help brands build deeper connections with their customers. Before we kick things off, please make note of a few house rules. There are really no rules, really, with the exception of we'd love to hear from you during and after the webinar. So please share your comments and questions with us in the Zoom chat function. We'll try and answer all questions at the end. And if we don't, we'll certainly connect with you after. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jake and David.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Excited to be here. And greetings to everybody sitting in their guest bedrooms, kitchen tables, and the occasional actual office. A lot of fun. So a few weeks ago, I had a major CMO say, Jake, with everything going on in the world, with the elections coming up, with all of the conflict happening around America, what should we be doing? Should we even be out there? And so that's really what we wanted to talk about today, because while COVID has been the major storyline affecting us, and it certainly continues to affect us, we're beginning to get some interplay of other factors. And it does affect the psychology of America. And it does mean that the messaging and strategies that we've been using need to change. That doesn't surprise anybody. What may surprise a lot of folks is that you can use some of the conflict going on to stand out, to elevate our creative. Now, this doesn't mean I'm suggesting that you go endorse a presidential candidate or go pick a fight unnecessarily, but there are opportunities out there to use this period of unique psychology to help yourself stand out. And that's really what we want to talk about today. So let's go ahead and dive in. Just a quick version about Intermark. As you are likely aware, we are the nation's largest behavioral sciences driven marketing firm. And when I say behavioral sciences, I really mean psychology, sociology, behavioral economics. And we apply those rigorously, applying academic research into marketing to get better outcomes. And we've been able to do this for some of the largest, most successful brands in America, but also for some regional and smaller brands, because the principles are easily applied in lots of places. And the thing that's consistent about them is they always get better outcomes than when you're just shooting from the hip. Now, when it comes to what we do, we like to say that we do everything from ads to apps. So everything under the marketing sun. So we're going to cover a breadth of ground. As always, everything from mobile apps to what your TV spots might say, to social media and PR. So if you have questions, feel free to touch on any of those. We're happy to dig in and dive in, and we'll talk a lot about big ideas. But as always, we want to start with a psychology update. What is America feeling and thinking right now? And then we want to talk about how we can leverage that state of psychology to stand out more. And that's the heart of it. So we'll begin, as we always do, with taking a look at what's going on in psychology. And it's crazy. It's never been like this before. I think that is safe to say, and our stress levels are climbing. Right, David?
Yeah, COVID is still here, and that's difficult. It's really difficult. It's a lot. It's a lot. So, we can reflect back and acknowledge that we flattened the curve, but now it's not flat. So we're still dealing with it. we had early March, no notion of a new threat being present, and we retreated, felt some fear. We went into quarantine and hid ourselves away from people and adjusted to forming new habits and new ways of living our life. And then we reopened and had to adjust now to engaging with brands in a new way once again. And a lot of questions that we had about how do we operate in this society. And now we're sort of in this phase of sort of COVID fatigue. So it's really hard. There's so much information that's coming at us. It's hard to pay attention to everything, and even to really feel like we're processing everything as much as we should be processing it. There's like fires in California, and there's like hurricanes coming, and so many things going on, and to deal with. And that's important to think about the state of mind of the customer right now in our society.
And there are really two major things that you can think about here. One is that our stress levels continue to climb. In every single phase, we've seen them go up. And the second is in that COVID fatigue is it means people are kind of getting worn out of COVID, and we're changing our risk calculus. So we're beginning to see people take risks that they wouldn't have before. In the early days of the pandemic, when we had like 50 cases in the entire country, people were locking it down, getting pretty serious about it. Now, 6 months in, people are going, well, even though there's 50,000 daily cases-ish, I'm just tired of it, and I'm just going to go see my friends. I'm going to the store, et cetera. And that will have implications for retail, and we'll talk about some of those and some of our offline communications. But the headline here is about stress.
Yeah, and the variance of COVID fatigue in the society, some people are more fatigued than others. So you have some who are going out and doing these new things, others who are in a different state. And of course, that's a major contribution to the conflict and tension that we're experiencing right now. So you got 90% reporting that they're struggling emotionally. This is the US National Pandemic Emotional Impact Report. This is data from June, so it's really recent data looking at where we're at, 5 months into this. 41% report adverse mental or behavioral health conditions. And
it is important to note that that data point is 3.5 times higher than what we would consider baseline data, which means we're all stressed, and a lot of people are really, really stressed to the point it's impacting their mental health.
Yeah, and this is contributing to some anger and violence that we're seeing. We're still seeing arguments over mask wearing. This started months ago, but it's still present. And there's increases in violent crime in many US cities. So a lot of tension out there, and a lot of difficulty that people are having interacting with others and engaging in this difficult time. So thinking about why that might be, or what contributes to this tension, we talked last time about this notion of mortality salience, which is that we have a psychological effect where we receive cues to our own mortality, and that brings up these difficult feelings for us. And so we have certain psychological buffers that help bring down those negative, difficult, anxious feelings, like forming social structures, finding meaning, forming an identity. So you could think about a lot of the changes in behavior that are going on right now as an attempt to find new meaning, find new identities. And, there's a lot of, essentially in the context of mortality salience, of mortality cues, we become more extreme versions of ourselves. So those who are likely to stay home are more likely to stay home. Those who go out can be more likely to go out. And that's really where the conflict and tension happens, because that's what conflict is. It's when you are trying to engage in some behavior, or you have a psychological concept, but it doesn't align with what you expect from the environment. And that means you have to adjust your behavior or your psychological understanding. And that's what tension is. That's what conflict is. And so we have it socially. We have tension financially. Should I save money, or should I buy that ice cream because I really deserve a reward? Lifestyle tensions, having to go out into the world, and do I wear masks, and how do I engage with this business, and so on. So the goal here is to think about the notion that there's a lot of this in the environment right now, but actually conflict and tension is a fundamental part of the human experience. It's something that we're very sensitive to, and it's something that we need to consider because it's so difficult to get people engaged right now. And so thinking about how can brands use conflict and tension responsibly to engage their audience, particularly with the notion that this audience is open to new perspectives and experiences. This is probably one of the biggest times where people are going to form new habits and new associations with brands and new routines than a long time.
Yeah, and let's pause and make sure this one sinks in. We're probably never going to have another period where people are as willing to change their brand relationships as they are right now. Now's the opportunity if you view it like that. And if you view it like that, there's a great time for growth and change. If you don't, if you pull back, well, could be the opposite side. We could be the ones losing market share to some of our competitors. And we've talked that there are a few core marketing strategies that you can employ during this period. You know, previously, before we get to the conflict ones, we've talked that you can go positive. We can be funny. We can be lighthearted and talk about the good in America. We've talked that you can entirely pull back on your marketing and just avoid what's going on right now. And we know the outcomes from that. It means you're going to lose market share. But there's this third strategy that we really want to explore today, and that's taking advantage of this unique psychological state of conflict, of intense stress. Now, the tactics you can employ to do this, or the strategies, are number one, you could be proactive. Now, the difference here is getting out into the world versus being reactive. The second strategy we can employ is poking the bear, actually picking a fight online or in the media with a competitor. Number three is we can embrace some of our imperfection to gain or elevate ourselves and feel more real. Number four is we can create tension and then relieve that tension because that has a strong psychological effect. And the last strategy is to carve our niche, or to use some tribal sort of mechanisms to connect with people in a stronger way by isolating who we are not good fits for. Now, the heart of all this has to do with being better at marketing. Now, when we have looked at studies related to brand and marketing effectiveness, there are two things that pop out. Number one is that the big dogs win. If you are the brand leader, you likely have the most money and the most name awareness, and that's hard to overcome. It means that Coca-Cola is going to continue being Coca-Cola as long as they're Coca-Cola. But number two should be refreshing, and that's the level of creativity we have. And within creativity, as we're going to explore, it really means doing things different than the cliches within the category, standing out. If you are willing to do things to stand out, you can dramatically increase the effectiveness of your advertising, and that's what we want to talk about today. Doing some things differently by leaning into conflict. So the first example of that is by being proactive. Now, what we're trying to get across here are there some brands that go ahead and address issues before they perhaps need to be addressed, before the public has raised those issues. And there are brands that wait until they receive public pressure to respond or issue statements. And as you're going to see, there's a dramatic difference in efficacy depending on being proactive or reactive. We're going to strongly recommend companies to be proactive, to go ahead and put some stakes in the ground and lean into them. And there's some good reason for this. And it's because how people perceive us has changed dramatically over time. Used to be we had complete control of what our brands were, and now we're losing some of that control. Right, David?
Yeah, this is one of the main points of conflicts and tension in advertising, is that brands have a message or a perception that they're trying to convey, but the public has the ability to create their own perception. And so trying to get alignment with that is a source of tension. And to really understand that, we can contrast it with how it used to be, where to get your message in front of people, there were limited channels. It was either TV, newspaper, radio, and everybody saw the same ad. So if you're Coke, you've got that one same commercial that everybody sees. They've got that coherent message. Now, everybody has the opportunity to see different messaging, even from that same company, but they have the opportunity to create their own messaging, their own story about that brand by themselves. So as a brand, you need to keep your head about you and control and have some proactive effort to guide that, and not run around like you got your head cut off as people decide who you are. And that is the notion of brand incoherence. If you're not proactive, then people can form whatever opinion that they form in the public sphere. So taking Uber as an example, in this stereotypically stock looking photograph, the first person sees Uber as a taxi service. The second person says, oh, Uber, it's like Airbnb, but for cars. And the third person says, Uber, don't they not pay their drivers well? So you have all different perceptions about what the brand is.
So the big delineation here is controlling your narrative, being proactive versus reactive, waiting on the internet, if you will, to say something about us and responding to it. And what we find is that the first mover effect, or creating first impressions, create lasting impressions. And that's an easy way to think about this. So you want to be the one to define what the public thinks. Great example of being proactive was Land O'Lakes removing the Native American from their packaging. To my knowledge, they had not received a lot of public pressure around this, and it was just as we're beginning to see social movements earlier this year, and they were very proactive about happening. Got a big brand lift, got lots of positive accolades, etc. The flip side of that is the Washington Redskins, who had what some people consider as a racial slur as part of their name and had received pressure for decades about this. And because of the social movements, they finally decided to change. And it felt to the public like they were finally giving in and almost, fine, we'll go ahead and change it. And it felt that way in part because they didn't even have a name. We still don't have a name. It's going to be the Washington football team. And so it feels half-hearted, almost like they're giving in as opposed to controlling their brand story. Now, the effect of some of that is that their brand scores have slid after the fact. They didn't receive the accolades that they could have by taking control of this and, of course, being proactive. And so the response from the public and the effect on the brand score varies greatly. It doesn't mean they can't recoup it over time, but they miss an opportunity to get an initial lift by doing something proactive.
Yeah, they missed out on an opportunity to get some brand equity on their new name. So that's the importance of being proactive there.
Let's take a look at another really famous example, this Colin Kaepernick ad that I know everybody has seen. Believe in something if it means sacrificing everything. This ad's coming up on 2 years old. And when it came out, suffice it to say, it was super controversial. A lot of people were like, I can't believe you're putting a stake in the ground. And of course, Nike did really well afterwards because they're trying to target millennials as their primary audience. But particularly now that the ad has aged a little bit, it looks particularly strong because they put a stake in the ground and it dramatically increased the level of believability that this is something they care about. And Nike's brand scores have continued to go up in part because they were very proactive about saying something that they believe in. But that doesn't mean that we can avoid negative criticism because that's going to happen. People are going to say things. People are going to call you out online, even for things that are kind of outside of your zone of influence. And those negative opinions can be difficult to overcome.
Yeah, that's the importance of trying to be proactive and make sure that the negative opinions don't develop too strongly because we have a confirmation bias. Once we establish an opinion about something, it's hard to receive information that changes our mind about it. And so, typically in marketing, we focus on the three different audiences: the audience who would never purchase the product, those who are going to purchase the product anyway, and those who would purchase the product if they receive some messaging. Obviously, we want to talk to those who would purchase the product if they receive our messaging. And among that group, those who have a slightly negative opinion, one thing to think about among them is to use indirect routes to influence. So if you communicate to them while they're doing another task, then they'll be focused on another task. So those areas of the brain that are involved in rationalizing why they have that negative opinion are busy doing something else, and you can allow that information to come through and potentially have a better chance of changing that opinion. So thinking about radio, often when we listen to radio, we're doing another task. The notion of second screening, if we think that people are likely to be watching TV, but also on their phones during that time, then that can be a way to get information in without the system coming on and rationalizing our negative views toward it.
There are a lot of online places where this works really well as well, where people are kind of multitasking when they're on social media, when they're just surfing the web. You can get messages in front of them while they're processing something else. So if you want to change some negative opinions, great place to do it. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the second strategy that we can use, and that's poking the bear or provoking a fight. Now, you may ask, who is the bear in this metaphor? Well, the bear typically is whoever is dominant within your category. That person who has the market share, that gets the most effectiveness because of their market share and market dominance. By provoking a fight, we trigger something that we often refer to as the underdog effect. And what that means is when there is a conflict, between two entities and you don't have a rooting interest, you don't work for one or a natural fan of the one, we typically default to whoever the underdog is. It's why people root for whoever is playing the Yankees, or in college football, whoever is playing Alabama. We want to see those teams lose because we're pulling for the underdog. We can leverage that psychological phenomenon to elevate ourselves. And there have been some phenomenal examples of this. One of my favorites was from a few decades ago when Apple was wanted to provoke the bear. Now, the bear in their case was Microsoft and IBM. They dominated in the personal computer space, and they launched this Super Bowl ad talking about the individual breaking the chains and celebrating their individualness to stand out. They ran this ad one time, and it became iconic. And I'm sure we're all familiar with the ad. What you may not be as familiar with is now when Apple has become the bear, they are the 800-pound gorilla. Other folks are picking fights with them. Now, I'm sure you've seen in the press where Fortnite has decided they're going to pick a fight with Apple. They have sued them, but they're also going after them with their marketing. And they're using the same tactics that Apple used back when they were poking the bear. Now, they've taken the same ad and they recut it, but added Fortnite-type characters to it. And Fortnite is, of course, that online conflict game where people can customize their character and their attire and their weapons and add dance moves and things like that to harken back to the same ad about taking down the evil empire.
We have taken our tribute, our profits, our control. This power is ours and ours alone. We shall prevail.
Dig the unicorn axe. That's a nice touch to that one.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, the reason I chose this is because Fortnite is, by no one's estimation, a small company. I mean, worth a small fortune. They would often be considered the bear in a lot of circumstances, but yet they're able to leverage this because Apple is perceived to be bigger. And as a result, people root for Fortnite. We're beginning to see a lot of social movement and buzz that are pro Fortnite. Their numbers have gone up, their perception has gone up, and they actually have had enrollments go up. Another little bit older example goes back to telecommunications. Back in the 80s, if you were my age, you probably remember some of the telecommunications wars where MCI and AT&T were fighting over customers. Well, MCI launched 1-800-COLLECT. This was a notion like, hey, let's go after AT&T in this space. And they began to do really well. Well, AT&T responded and they said, hey, we're going to launch 1-800-OPERATOR, and we're going to heavily promote that. We're going to use our brand dominance to win. Well, MCI decided to poke the bear. They realized that a lot of people couldn't spell operator. And so they went and registered 1-800, several different variations of operator. And what happened when they provoked the bear, not only did they get a lot of press buzz about it, but every time AT&T would launch a big marketing push for 1-800-OPERATOR, MCI would go up substantially. Eventually, AT&T gave up, changed tactics, but it was a good example of poking the bear, leveraging some great smart psychology to lift themselves. But some more recent examples, perhaps, you're going to be very familiar with.
Yeah, a lot of people know about the fast food Twitter wars. The Chick-fil-A example here posted, per usual, will be closed on Super Bowl Sunday, no exceptions. Burger King says, don't worry, everyone, we'll be open per usual. And Chick-fil-A responds, awfully bold of you to assume people actually care if you're open on Sundays or not.
And, you know, when we started mentioning QSR, I'm sure everyone was thinking, oh, you're going to show a clever Wendy's snippet. Well, Wendy's certainly pioneered this space, but other companies are realizing poking the bear, particularly in the online space, can be a very effective way to draw attention to yourself and actually elevate yourself if you're poking somebody that's larger than you are.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a really big company to be doing this. This is an example of Strange Brew, a little coffee shop, responding to the McDonald's sign there that says, welcome back, MSU student. And they said, nice, which one? Just poking at the fact that they did not include an S after students. But also there's a lot of uncertainty going on in the back to school environment right now. So there might really just be one student showing up to campus. Maybe he hasn't watched the news for a couple months. It's like, where's everybody at? What's going on?
People love to see conflict, and it's a great way to elevate yourself. So in the case of Domino's, they are the bear. You know, Domino's dominates the pizza delivery space and has continued to do really well, particularly during the pandemic. Well, they decided to poke a different bear. So Halo is a super popular game on the Microsoft platform. They launched a new version of it called Halo Infinite, and it got immediate backlash because the graphics weren't up to snuff according to some of the online reviews. Well, Domino's, who has a core demographic of gamers, decided to poke the Halo bear and kind of making fun of the new Halo, as they did in this ad. Got a lot of positive buzz. The gamers all felt like, hey, Domino's has my back by picking a fight that I feel a need to invest in. And this natural rooting in any conflict leveraged by Domino's got them a lift in brand scores.
Yeah, a lot of gamers ordering pizzas to their homes right now, I'm sure. Now, one of the bears is New Orleans in terms of Mardi Gras. When we think of Mardi Gras, we think of New Orleans. But actually, Mobile, Alabama is the beginning of Mardi Gras. And so this is a story of what we did at Intermark Group to poke that New Orleans Mardi Gras bear and gain some awareness for the notion that Mobile is actually the original space of Mardi Gras.
News 5 at 6 o'clock. Alabama tourism officials score a big win in Mobile with a series of ads aimed at promoting Mardi Gras. The signs take direct aim at the carnival in New Orleans with signs in the Big Easy. News 5's Chad Petrie has the story.
Signs like these have been making the rounds online. This one snapped in Louisiana. It's one of 10 signs spread throughout the I-10 corridor telling drivers they are X number of miles away from Mobile.
And this won't surprise you to hear that Mobile did really, really well with Mardi Gras that year. I think they had some record attendance and draw a lot of positive attention to themselves. And it starts with this notion that people love conflict, particularly when it feels like good-natured conflict like this. So great execution of poking the bear. So shifting tactics, we're going to talk about embracing imperfection. The brain is hardwired to notice things that are not perfect because that's where we find uniqueness, interest, and a lot of positive assets. Now, there have been a lot of great studies that illustrate this effect. One of them was done by a urinal manufacturer showing that when they added a decal of a fly to the urinal, that it reduced the spillage, if you will, in men's restrooms. And it was just illustrating the effect that we are drawn towards imperfection. Now, more broadly than that, the concept of having imperfections can create the belief that something is more real or better than when things seem too symmetrical and identical. And this is easy to exploit within the marketing space by leveraging something called the pratfall effect.
Yeah, if you could take a look at these two cookies here and ask yourself which cookie looks more appealing, 66% of people prefer the cookie on the left. And you can see that it has more imperfections. Puffing out. Looks like it probably had some more butter, some more of all that good cookie goodness going on. It looks like an actual cookie compared to the other one. And that's the power of imperfection here.
We see this in the online space as well. As we've talked about with online reviews, the number of reviews drives human behavior because of the social proof effect. But what we didn't spend a lot of time talking about is the amplitude of those reviews. We don't like buying things that are 5 stars. That seems weird, but the reasoning makes sense. It's because when things are fully 5 stars, our brain thinks, wait a minute, something's wrong here. They've been making this up. Surely there's something not right with it. As a result, people by a huge margin are much more likely to purchase something with a 4.2 to 4.5 rating, because what that conveys is there may be something wrong with it, and they'll dig in, and as soon as they find any flaw, it validates the positive things that they believe about that product. So you don't want perfection in most places. We've seen some companies leverage this to help grow. Avis, as you I'm sure likely have seen, goes by the moniker "We Try Harder." What you may not know is almost 5 decades ago, Avis was on the verge of going out of business. They had had a decade where they just couldn't make any money. They weren't growing. And so they launched this phrase. And it was basically taking a negative that, hey, we're not number one, and turning it into a positive. And that year they turned a profit, and it was the beginning of a rocket sled of growth. They haven't looked back since. And now Avis can widely be considered a bear. They're one of the huge players in the industry. And they fight tooth and nail with Hertz, but because they are leveraging this piece of imperfection, it feels more believable when they say something. So we're not number one, therefore we try harder. So people go, oh, you must try harder.
Yeah, this is an advertisement from Apple here, and this demonstrates the subtle way that embracing imperfection can engage people and be interesting. So let's check it out.
You know what I love about that ad is Apple completely made up a flaw and are leaning into it. And it's because it still leverages that human fascination with imperfection.
Yeah, distractingly good. I love that tagline. And I think a lot of our workouts are looking like that nowadays.
When they occur.
Yeah. Well, we're working out in private, so we could do whatever karaoke performance we want to do. That's one of the benefits now of the current climate. Now, this is an ad that instead of giving you too much details, just check it out. Try to think about what's going on here, because it's
This is where they lean hard into something that could be perceived as a major negative.
Mm-hmm.
Got a cough? Try Buckley's. You'll be glad you did. Buckley's. It tastes awful, and it works.
Not only does this make me laugh, but I love the tagline, because when you embrace a strong negative, the brain takes that and goes, oh, well, the positive must be true, even though that's a nonsensical relationship. And that's at the heart of the pratfall effect. And watching the ad, you get to the end of it and you say, oh, well, that must work. Otherwise, they would never tolerate it being that bad tasting.
Yeah, they're using that imperfection to build people's attention throughout the entire ad. You're wondering, why are they making these faces? What's going on? And then at the end, you get that memorable ending of, okay, it tastes awful. So, I mean, medicine should taste awful. Like if it tastes good, you think it can't be working. It should taste bad.
That's right.
It's the thing with toothpaste, right? Toothpaste is supposed to taste bad. It has something in it that makes us feel it in our mouth so that we feel like it's cleaning our teeth. Now, a Canadian club had an interesting issue. This was the whiskey that your dad drinks. So what happens when your brand is known as the brand that your dad drinks? Well, let's turn that flaw into a feature, because actually your dad was a pretty cool dude, and maybe he wouldn't have even hung out with you.
Love how they've taken the brand perception of a negative and leaned hard into it to elevate themselves. Great example of focusing on a flaw. We did this recently with one of our clients, Rita's Italian Ice. As those of you in the Northeast probably know, Italian ice, when you eat it, it colors your tongue. And so we took that negative and turned it into a brand attribute that, hey, when the sun's out and it's warm, you're going to see a lot of people showing off their Ritas by showing the color of their tongue. And this immediately took off. We saw social media lift of people taking pictures of themselves, particularly kids posting them online of sun's out, tongue's out, and it became an attribute that gives a realism to the brand itself. Great example of taking a flaw and turning it into a feature. All right, strategy number 4, creating tension. Now, as I'm sure you are aware, tension is part of all great narratives. Every TV show, every movie you ever watch intentionally creates tension. And this is because we're hardwired for those sort of narratives. Nobody wants to listen to the story about the princess that woke up and had a great day and lived happily ever after, because there's no tension within the story. So that we are hardwired for using it. However, in marketing, people are often afraid of using tension. And this is unfortunate, because when we relieve tension, when we let the tension go, it triggers the reward system of the brain. It makes the brain feel like it won something. And this is why sometimes we're so pulled into movies that are high tension, particularly the summer blockbusters. But we can leverage it in marketing. It's not just about the tension itself, it's about relieving it, as David's favorite movie clip illustrates.
Yeah, this is the first thing that came to mind thinking of storytelling, conveying tension. I think a lot of us remember that. So let's check out this short clip and really feel what tension feels like.
Jimmy, what is it? It's a velociraptor. It's inside.
You know, we've all seen the movie. I knew he gets away, but every time that door closes, I feel some sense of relief, like, oh, thank goodness. Now, you can leverage this by acknowledging real world tension and how you can be a solution for that. One of our clients, Physicians Mutual, has done this very effectively. They are in the retirement insurance space. So as people approach retirement, their stress levels go way up because getting into retirement is confusing. It is scary, particularly when you're trying to evaluate Medicare options. So they acknowledge that confusion and then show how they can relieve the tension. And they do this by showing a series of what I would call fever dreams, dreams that we often have, and using those as a metaphor for getting ready for retirement.
At Physicians Mutual, we know that planning for retirement can feel scary.
Heard you're retiring soon. My husband just retired. Figuring out how to stay covered was a real doozy.
Hey, look, Leonard's premiums are showing.
He doesn't even have a Medigap.
We're gonna say tomorrow.
Anyways, we found Physicians Mutual. They made it really easy.
I'll give him a call.
Retire with confidence. We'll listen and find you the coverage you need.
Physicians Mutual, Physicians Mutual.
So, Dr. David, does everybody have the nightmare where you in public somewhere and you all of a sudden are wearing your underwear?
Yeah, I think that's a universal human fear.
Yeah.
And, this is a really important thing for companies to think about, relieving the tension of making these major life decisions, because at this stage right now, a lot of people are going to be turning to trying to solve those major life decisions. So if you're in that insurance, the healthcare space, the finance space, this type of approach can be really powerful right now.
That's right. Now, another way you can do it is by acknowledging tensions that people feel in the real world. One of our clients, American Family Care, saw an opportunity to take advantage of the election stress. And I know you're already beginning to feel that. This ad is actually from the last election cycle, and I think they're about to begin running it again. And it acknowledges the stress that we're all feeling and jokingly creates real world symptoms that they can address. So it's intended to be a humorous ad.
Oh, my political opinion will be heard.
Campaigns. Election-related injuries are on the rise. If you need urgent care, AFC is here to help. Here are some common campaigns. Headaches, bitten tongue, thoughts of moving to Canada, crazy uncle syndrome, and more. So whether these elections have you feeling blue or seeing red, come to American Family Care for the best in urgent non-emergency treatment. At AFC, you'll get the right care right now.
Crazy uncle syndrome. I love that. They're really helping to relieve the tension related to real world tension that they are artificially poking at. This was an entirely online ad intended to go viral, and it did. Many tens of millions of views and shares, kind of help relieve some of the real world tension. And I think it is a great example of how they were able to dramatically elevate their brand scores.
Yeah, I think we all know. I think that's another universal thing is the crazy uncle.
Yeah, we all got that guy, right?
This is a Intermark group work here for Fiora, and you could see the tension arises from just showing a roll of toilet paper that's unwound like that. You know, whenever you see that, you're like, oh my gosh, it shouldn't be like that. I need to roll that back up. And then right next to it, you've got an empty roll of toilet paper. Well, we know how much anxiety that creates, especially in today's toilet paper scarce climate.
That's right. And Fiora got some huge lift on that within a week of the boards going up. Their sales within those regions were up by 30%, which is a massive sales lift in a very short period of time. And those sales lift perpetuated for almost a year, even after the boards came down. Another example of this came from the Southern Museum of Flight, where we added a mannequin to an outdoor board with a real parachute that was attached to the board with the words drop in. So it creates the tension of, oh my goodness, is there a real person up there? The boards were only up for a couple of months, but the result was immediate. So the Museum of Flight saw their attendance double, and not surprisingly hit record levels of attendance that year. And it lasted for multiple years, even with a short duration, because it drew so much attention, so much buzz by leveraging tension and then relieving it of, hey, this isn't real. It's obviously a promo for the Southern Museum of Flight. Excellent. Let's get to our last strategy, and that is carving your niche. Now, when we ask CEOs who they want to market to, the answer is everybody. I want everybody to buy our products. But what we find is that when you define who you want to market to, who is best fitted for your product, it helps reinforce who you really are. Now, the hard part about this is acknowledging that you're not right for everybody. Now, if we acknowledge that we're not right for everybody and lean into that, who are we not right for, it helps create authenticity. It will help elevate our brand amongst people who might be inclined to do business with us. So, great example of leaning into conflict and some tremendous national examples that you're all going to be familiar with. This works, again, because it leans back to creating smarter, more effective creative. Now, when we look at what helps differentiate effectiveness within advertising, we find that companies that are differentiated fare quite a bit better. When they are highly differentiated, they perform at almost twice the rate at companies that are mildly differentiated. So carving out who you are not a good fit for is a great way to create some of this differentiation.
Yeah, using marketing to really carve out and psychologically create that niche can be really important. And that's what Chick-fil-A does here, where they leverage the contrast between the hamburger and the chicken burger.
We're not hamburgers is at the heart of their strategy here. So if you want a hamburger, don't come here. And that worked out really well, and they've been running on this campaign for a couple of decades now.
Yeah, they personify the cows in a creative way, an interesting way, and that really helps their message come across.
Sure.
Harley Davidson has been another one that is going all out to say that you're unique if you're a Harley rider. There's something exciting and different about you. And here they are poking fun at the minivan folks, saying, how long are you in for?
I relate to that
ad. This is a Schwinn ad where the headline is, Schwinns are red, Schwinns are blue, cars suck, the end. At the very bottom there. You know, that's very poetic, very well put. And you can see they're getting at the bike crowd that is against cars.
That's right. Now, this is an ad for Bonnie Plants, who really tried to focus on people that are not great with plants. And I'd certainly fall into that category. Now, you may be thinking, hey, wait a minute, doesn't that define most people? Yes, it does. But by saying that they are the company and they are the product for people that are bad with plants, it helped gain relevance and help their creative stand out.
Prove it. What? they were gonna die anyway.
Man, I relate to that.
Makes me feel better about all the plants I've killed.
Truth. But leveraging some of these concepts can help us not just in creative, but also in our media strategies. And we do this by looking at attitudes, helping us use those to figure out our targeting. Now, this may seem a little counterintuitive, but remember, in media, most media companies are going about this the same way. What's the demographic information of who you're trying to target? What's their age range and their income range so I can run my database, et cetera. But if we think about the psychology of consumers and the attitudes they have, we can find very effective ways of bringing that notion of conflict marketing to help us target better. Great example David used from a prior campaign.
Yeah, this is one thinking about which browsers people use, and the notion that people who use the default browser will also tend to drink the default beer. If you make the effort, though, to go and find that special craft beer, you're slightly more likely to use the non-default browser. And this comes from the Choice Factory, where they found this. And this is something thinking about personality and attitude characteristics and how you can use that and incorporate that in your targeting. Usually we're bidding based on people's age and their gender. Here, where you can also bid on their browser usage if that's related to the audience that you're trying to communicate with.
Great example of finding ways to stand out and be more creative. And that's the punchline here. If you are the dominant brand in your space, you're probably going to do pretty well just because you're the dominant brand in your space. If you are not, we've got to lean hard into creativity. We've got to do things other people are unwilling to do and leverage strategies that the big brands aren't going to because they may view them as mildly controversial. By doing that, we can dramatically elevate our creative and get substantially better results. And that's what this is all about. So to recap, we are all super, super stressed and it's getting worse. But that creates opportunities because of the inherent conflict that comes out of it. We can do this leverage this by being proactive, going ahead and putting out messages before we have to be responsive. We can pick fights and poke the bear and use the underdog effect to elevate our brand. We can embrace imperfection and lean into things that may be considered flaws to elevate the credibility of the claims we want to make. We can create tension and then relieve that tension, knowing that relieving that tension helps elevate our brand scores. And then lastly, we can carve our niche and define who we are not a good fit for. And that creates a level of believability and helps us stand out in a crowded marketplace. Now, let me finish by saying this. Not all these are cut and dry to some of the other marketing strategies we've discussed. These can be complex and be considered a form of art. There are a lot of additional things we need to take in mind that we couldn't cover today, such as your social media response if you do one of these, how you're going to handle PR responses, how you need to be able to develop memes if you're doing an area that justifies those. So if you want more information about this, raise your hand. Happy to help talk you through some of this. Happy to help your brand work through some of this. But for now, I want to remind you that we have lots of additional content. We'll be posting this and related content both to our social media channels and to our website. So please come get some more information there. Want to make sure we've got a few minutes here for questions at the end so that we can dive into a few of these things. If I don't get to your question, I promise I will reply to you personally. If you would like some individual time where we can talk about your brand and how to apply some of these things, just give Ashley an email. We'll schedule some time. Love to talk about some more of this. I obviously geek out on it quite a bit. So with that narrative ended, Ashley, let's get to some good questions. What do we got?
Yeah, so let's see. So I poked the bear with our audience here. Curious about brand stressors, got a few responses. So Laura Boyle is asking, she's trying to think of ways, how do I please everyone? Any thoughts, responses there, guys?
Well, here's the short answer, and you may not like it. You can't please everybody. Our moms told us this when we were young, and it certainly applies in marketing. Part of a great brand differentiation exercise is defining who you're not a good fit for and being comfortable with that and getting your executives comfortable with that. When you do that, it allows you to stand out more in a crowded marketplace, to differentiate yourself. And that is at the heart of a great execution. It allows you to poke the bear. It allows you to poke at people you're not a good fit for. And so that's at the heart of it, of being comfortable with not being able to please everybody. It just helps with defining the audience that you're okay not pleasing. much like Nike did with their Colin Kaepernick ad. It was clear they were okay with not pleasing, say, the religious right, who was opposed to that core message, and it worked out incredibly well for them because the audience they cared about, the millennials, really responded and their sales went through the roof immediately, and it's been a long-lasting success.
Great. So from Harsh Parikh, interesting question. Why brands are not leveraging meme marketing? If brands are leveraging, can we share any examples?
Oh man, great example. I think we might do an entire webinar or additional content related to meme marketing. Great opportunity. So a few initial thoughts. We do have some brands that do lean into meme marketing. The first way to do that is to actually create your own meme. Now, some examples that you are likely all familiar with. I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. Therefore, I am really smart about something, and the internet took it and ran with it. MasterCard did this by creating their own meme, and there is a methodology to how you can create your own meme and then put it out in the marketplace for people to run with, you know, the MasterCard moments, or is this a Kodak moment? There have been a lot of memes in marketing throughout history. The second way you can do it is by having a social media team that is attuned to your brand, that has well-defined space in which they can work and can respond fast. Because leveraging memes is about being responsive. And that's frankly where most companies break down. The approval process takes forever to run things through legal and compliance and get approval. And by the time you're ready to put it out, the meme's dead because memes turn over very, very quickly. It can be done very effectively. We saw that ad from Domino's earlier in today's presentation where they were leaning into a meme about the Halo having terrible graphics. That's a good example of a meme ad. I think there's a lot of opportunity in that and might be worth its own discussion, but it does require a different sort of structure and a much more highly responsive social media presence than a lot of companies are used to. A lot of companies that we know are developing their social media content a month ahead of time, and that's just not going to cut it in the meme world.
Great. So do you have a question that I think will be relevant for all? So with so many unknowns, I suspect a lot of people on the call are trying to figure out what they do next, right? We're still in a pandemic. How do brands weigh the pros and cons of leveraging, you know, conflict and tension strategy right now with so many unknowns?
It's a great example. You got to start with what are your marketing goals? You know, are we doing well? Do we need to shift to a retention strategy, or do we need to stand out? If the answer is you need to stand out, then these should be strategies that we need to think through, and they need to be viewed in the total universe of all the marketing strategies, including what we discussed in prior webinars. These can be very effective in helping you stand out. We've seen a lot of great case studies, a lot of great examples. They can also be dangerous, as I'm sure some of you are worried about, but done well, they can really help you grow. Happy to discuss that in more depth. I realize we're running out of time today, so I want to say thank you to everybody for your time. We will respond to any other questions that we did not get to. We'll be posting this to our website tomorrow. You will, of course, get an email with a link to it if you have attended the webinar. And as I said, you want to talk about this more, I would love nothing more. So give me a call. Let's dive in and talk about how your brand can do it. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm flattered that you would keep coming and listening to us. I'm having a blast. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.